You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Red Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right. Every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to share the news on cities. Special thanks to Kate Gasparo, who joined us for last week's show. I've also got a call out to some old friends, but we'll probably have Kate back on soon. That was really fun chatting with Kate. Hope you guys like that. But as we do when we're Han Solo, let's chat about what's happening with the Talking Headways podcast. This is where, when we're Han Solo, we try to kind of cover all the comings and goings of the show, who's coming up, some of the stuff that we've covered in the last few weeks, etc. And got some great stuff coming up on the Talking Headways podcast that usually comes on this feed on Thursdays. This week we've got Lawrence Frank, I believe, is coming on the show. We've already recorded the show, obviously, but Lawrence will be the one who is being released this week. We're talking about his longtime work linking public health and the built environment and transportation. His work was the basis for creating WalkScore, which is a really cool fact. We recently had a conversation with Melissa and Chris Bruntlett about their new book, which I'm excited to share with you all, Women in Cities. And that was a really fun conversation. I was up at 11. They were up early in the Netherlands, and we had a good time. So I'm glad to share that with folks. Last week, we shared an episode with Scott Danforth on his book about disability rights legend Ed Roberts. I hope everybody gets a chance to listen to that one. Sometimes I kind of throw stuff at you all, and I know that this is related to transportation and urban planning policy because of the disability rights movement and what they've done for accessibility, et cetera. But I really think that this is just an interesting look at one of the leaders of the disability rights movement and what he went through to get all the things that we know today were successful. And, there's a lot more to do, obviously. There's a ton more to do, obviously, but the start is really, really fascinating. So I hope folks get a chance to listen to that one. If you haven't listened to it, go back and check it out. Really cool to talk with Scott about Ed Roberts and what the history of the movement has meant. We actually, at Impact in Portland, we saw Lex Frieden he got himself a virtual avatar, and he was talking with GB Arrington on the stage, and if folks were there, they might remember that as one of the closing plenary. But Lex's features prominently in the book, and it was really cool to see somebody chatting about the disability rights movement and where it's come from, but also to see somebody that I've seen actually on screen talking about something that I just read in a book. I always love that part of reading and connecting with people that are still alive and still here with us to tell us all their stories. We've got our Kingwood episode complete. I love that this episode is complete. I'm hoping that we can share it with you soon. We just got so many other good episodes coming that I kind of, I keep on pushing it back. There's a little audio stuff that's going on with that one, and I think I'll just release it because it's really good, and some of the stuff is really great, and I don't know how to fix the audio stuff, honestly. It's just when we recorded one of the guests who is one of the main folks that we talk about in the Kingwood episode. It was on a telephone line, and I recorded it telephone line to my computer, and so it was really kind of like a rough recording. Maybe I should do it again. I'm not sure. I keep on going back and forth about it, but we have the story all set out. We have the music in, we have the edits and stuff, and so I'm kind of reluctant to do that, but it also would make it a little bit cleaner, but it's you can hear it, and it makes sense, but perfectionist me is just kind of going back and forth with it. So we'll see. But Kingwood episode is really great. It'll be out hopefully soon. If I get that thing fixed, maybe I'll go and have a discussion with the guest again, or maybe I'll just release it. We'll see. We're also scheduled to chat this week with Yona for our annual prediction show. I know that is one of you guys' favorites. You all love that episode every year. Yona's been on for over 10 years now, maybe 13 actually. We've had so many years with Yona. It's always fun to laugh at the predictions that we made, the ones that we got right, the ones we didn't get right. and have a little bit of fun in some dark times. Jeremy Wells is coming to talk about his historic preservation book, Managing the Magic of Old Places. You talk about some really interesting stuff in there. I haven't recorded this one. I haven't read the book yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. I also recently got a book today called Sidewalk Nation, and I'm working on some times to talk about Frontera Freeways, which is about a highway that split El Paso, Texas in half. So there's a couple of books coming up. My stack is always getting stacked up. There's always books coming in, and so I love doing those book reviews with you all. And, I'm wondering sometime if I should just do a show where we have everybody kind of roundtable who's read these books. Some of them, obviously, I'm getting before they come out, but the ones that do come out, sometimes I have them come out a few weeks later. So maybe it'd be interesting to actually have a follow-up to some of these. Like if anybody wants to read the Ed Roberts book and have a chat about it, I'd love to chat about it with folks. So that might be interesting to do as well. Also, last week was our 10th anniversary of us doing the newsletter as a paid product. We've been doing the newsletter for 20 years in total, but I'm so happy that with everything that we've created thus far and all the information we've shared, including on the podcast, but the newsletter is kind of where it all started. And the blog, theoverheadwire.blogspot.com, which is still out there, actually. Theoverheadwire.com is where we live now, but I did have a Blogspot blog for a long time, and it was pretty popular back in the day, in the height of the blogosphere back in the 2000s. But yeah, we've been doing this for 20 years now, and 10 years as a paid product. So if you do want to check out the newsletter, I imagine that most of you who are listening to this now have probably heard me talk about it, or at least signed up and tried it out for a little bit. But go check it out. Go to theoverheadwire.com. There's a button on the top right of the site to sign up, and it's free. It's free to sign up. You can do a 2-week trial, and then if you want to continue with the premium version, then you can. And we have that available for folks. We've been doing that for 10 years, and that's what's kept me going, really. That's where most of our revenue comes from is the newsletter. So we really appreciate everybody who signed up for that. Also, So, and finally, I do want to acknowledge again what's happening in Minnesota and around the country. And while the media might not be telling you what's actually going on, they might have said it's calmed down, or it most certainly has not. Things are still happening. You still see it on social media. Keep calling your representatives, making sure they understand that this is not okay. Sending children to detention centers is not okay. And not following the Constitution is not okay. Breaking and entering is still a crime. If you do not have a warrant signed by a judge, for example, you can't just get an administrative warrant. You have to get a judicial warrant. There's a lot of stuff that I just don't like that's going on, and it's frustrating. We'll just follow along as we can. We try to help where we can. But I just want to reiterate that it's not over. We still have a lot of work to do to get these things fixed. And then, that's a kind of, again, it's hard to segue from that. It's hard to segue. And also, we actually write a post on Streets.mn every Friday. We do on Greater Washington, Streets.mn, and Urban Milwaukee, which if you haven't checked out any of those sites, go and check those out. Those are the local watering holes for folks who care about urban issues and in those cities. And, I keep thinking about our friends at Streets.mn a lot, and the folks that I know that live in the Twin Cities that are going through this. And so, everything is tough right now. So just wanted to put them at the head of the class in terms of, what we're thinking about. But we've got some other stuff to do. So again, the segue is weird, but thanks again for everybody who's ordered bus or bike scarves. If you'd like to order one, just head on over to theoverheadwire.com or email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Also, I've been loving the pictures of folks wearing their scarves at events and rallies. Again, that's what they're for. I think I mentioned with Kate last week that we saw one with Sam Sklar at a Boston Celtics game with his green bike scarf. I love that. And we recently did run out of bus-only scarves. We did run out, but actually just now, literally, I just walked downstairs to record this after picking up the new set of bus scarves. So I got them today, so they are here. I'll turn the orders back on. So we've already had several pre-orders. I'll send those out soon, tomorrow, hopefully. And we got the bus only bike scarves, bus only scarves back. Got the bike only scarves back. And so if folks want to order those, or if folks are interested in those, please check out the site, theoverheadwire.com. Again, I've been saying this for a while. I'm going to refocus on trying to design a new one. I know I've said I'd do that last year, and when it's funny when you go back and listen to old episodes and you hear some of the promises that I've made. I really apologize. We try to keep up with the promises that we make, but it's hard. Life gets in the way, etc. But I am thinking about either a transit one with rail or high-speed rail. Likely leaning towards high-speed rail, a scarf that might be there, but maybe a transit scarf that has to do with rail, maybe electrification, maybe something along those lines. I don't know. We'll think of something cool and design it. Maybe I'll have like a contest. I think I've talked about that before. Maybe I'll do a contest. I know that some of you are excited and have given me ideas, and so I appreciate that too. And as we always note, we really thank everyone supporting the show, whether that's on Patreon, patreon.com/theoverheadwire, or buying books off the bookshop site. You can support the show by going to our bookshop store and searching and ordering any book you want. It really helps us out, and I appreciate folks that have been doing that. Bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. Or folks ordering Cars or Cholesterol t-shirts. That's really great too. Any merch you can dream of through the TeePublic site. bit.ly/Cars or Cholesterol will take you there. And then Richard Wazensky designed that specific Cars or Cholesterol heart. And you can find him on Instagram at Dick David Sketches. What a great dude Richard is. And, go check out his stuff if you haven't already. I imagine a lot of you have. He does really great robots and stuff. He's a really great artist and also a bike advocate. So appreciate that. All of these things make great gifts for your birthdays or for the winter that is still here. It's still cold in a lot of the country, so order up quick, and then you can get your scarves and wear them around with pride. We also suggest folks sign up for the newsletter that we talked about at the top of this segment. We've also got a new YouTube explainer up that explains basically how the archive works that we've been collecting for over 10 years. And basically we've tagged and by topic and city, every single item that we've linked in there, 110,000 items now. So there's a way to go and check that out. Or if you want to ask me a question about a certain topic, I can probably send you to the right spot or collect a few things for you as well. I'll do that if you have a question because you listen to this episode, because you listen to the Talking Headways and Mondays at the Red Wire. Send me a note if you need a little research. If you have a little research question, I'll send you a couple links maybe under that topic area if you need them. And also, if you haven't already, please support the show. Again, as I mentioned before on Patreon, you can get the show free of outside ads. I've started putting some ads in the center of these episodes because I know that folks can support on Patreon and they get the complete show ad-free. So you get the show ad-free, which means not from these ads that I'm telling you now, but from the outside ads that we attach to the beginning and the end of the show and now in the middle of the show. But also we've been doing pod roll as well. So basically when you get to your Apple iTunes, it puts in a suggested episode there for advertising for other shows. So if you want to get rid of all that stuff, go to Patreon, $1 a month, and then you can get the show for free. We'll have something in the show notes that tells you how to do that specifically. This is episode 185. We're live and in session. Before we get to the show, I want to let folks know that they can get this podcast and Talking Headways wherever you find podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Thanks to everybody who subscribes to your podcatchers. I imagine that's why you're here listening now. And so let's get to this point in the show where we talk about the news. This is the part of the show that I think you guys care about most because you keep coming back and listening. Here are the few stories that piqued our interest from the newsletter over the last few weeks. These first ones are the most popular ones. The ones in the bonus section are the ones that I thought were interesting that you might think are interesting. Hopefully we think the similar things are interesting, although maybe you do not sometimes, and maybe you do sometimes. I imagine that's why you listen to the show. But we've got some really great stuff, so let's jump in. AI could draft regulations at USDOT. Officials are planning to use a version of Google's Gemini to generate transportation rules. The agency's general counsel reportedly said in a meeting that the agency is quote-unquote flooding the zone by using AI rather than aiming to write a perfect rule or even a very good rule. DOT regulations touch everything from gas pipelines to airplanes, and some staffers are concerned about the known accuracy issues with AI technology. This was by Jesse Coburn in ProPublica. No, I don't like this at all. The idea of using AI just to flood the zone. I don't like all the flooding of the zone that's happening now in social media, as it were. People just throwing slop and crap and stuff all over the place. I specifically, if you follow me on social media, you know that I do not flood the zone. I try to be very particular about what I post. about what we're sharing. We share on social media specifically the things that the most people read. And so one of the things, and share on this podcast as well, is what most people read. So if you're a part of the newsletter, you get all the stuff that I think is interesting, and then the stuff that is the most read or the most interesting that people think are the most interesting, we share again to the social media. And so it's stuff that is highly relevant. But specifically for this article, I don't like the idea of just creating rules that have gone through AI without, I'm guessing that their counsel, you have to have lawyers look at this stuff and whatever, but they're just going to go in and try to change rules. It's the same thing that happened with, Elon's Doge, or whatever you want to call it. They went in looking for AI, using AI and looking for keywords, and they found a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with what they were looking for. And so they messed a whole bunch of stuff up. And so I feel like that's the same thing that's going to happen here. They're going to have a bunch of messes up and cause problems with the lawyers. The lawyers are already busy enough as it is. Why would they have to go in and correct some AI stuff, slop stuff that they were generated? I don't think we need to be generating more and more junk that needs to be checked by humans. Why don't we just do it by human first and then not have to worry about it? And then you don't have to go in and fiddle with it later. I think we're going to get our brains mixed up with all this stuff coming out, which is really, really frustrating. Also, these regulations are about safety. They're about building correctly, and making sure that things are done right. So if that's messed up, then that's a problem. I'm sure there's somebody who has a different thought on this. I've heard folks that are very laudatory of AI and the machine learning and all the other ways you can say the use of more computing power. But for the moment, there's only certain things I feel like that you can actually use it for, and the rest, like writing regulations and things, are probably not a good use for it. Electric cars reduce California air pollution. A study looked at 1,687 California neighborhoods from 2019 to 2023 using satellite data. Researchers measured. I just took out. There was an edit here. I took out a sneeze because I sneezed in the middle of that. So apologies. That's why I'm laughing. Using satellite data, researchers measured a 1.1% decrease in nitrogen dioxide for every 200 zero emissions vehicles in a neighborhood. This was by Brian Silvestro in the Autopian. This is a really cool article and item that basically shows that the more electric vehicles are used in neighborhoods, the more that the satellite data can pick up that there's a nitrogen reduction in the atmosphere. So we can tell that by putting more zero emissions vehicles on the road, we're actually getting less pollution in the air, less of that stuff goes into your lungs. That means less health problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's keep on doing this. I don't know why we're continuing to say that electric cars are not necessary, or we want to keep on, funding the gas industrial complex, because eventually we'll all get to electric. It's a better product. It's more efficient in terms of energy use. And eventually we're going to get to a point where everybody's going to be able to fill up at a filling station, and it's just going to be just the same as filling up your gasoline car. And so inside of cities, obviously, there are places where we probably need to focus on active transportation. Not everybody needs a car, but outside where folks are primarily driving, there might be a use case where this is really, really big. And, we should be moving towards electric delivery vehicles, electric scooters, electric bikes, electric cars, electric everything, if we can. Los Angeles Metro Board opposes pro-housing law. SB 79 is a state law that allows taller buildings near transit hubs. All but two of LAMetro's board members are asking for an exemption for Los Angeles County, citing fear that activists would use the specter of new housing to resist transit expansion. But increasing density around stations has been proven to boost ridership and increase financial sustainability for transit systems. This was by Damian Newton in Streetsblog, California. Yeah, why are we preempting ourselves? Make them protest, the expansion of transit lines because they don't want more housing. Make them push back on that. If you're living on a corner that's a really dense place already, which is why there's probably a bus rapid transit or a light rail line going there, I think that perhaps you should expect change. Things are going to change, and the frustration out there from NIMBYs is palpable. But I don't think they should be killing bills like this. We're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on infrastructure, especially building subways, building light rail lines, and so why aren't we recouping that value that we've created? Why are the people that live there the ones that get to recoup all the value on that? That doesn't make any sense. And so, I don't like the LA and the board are actually acquiescing to this before it's even happened. The people are saying that they're going to, oppose transit lines, but how big is that group? Are they just full of bluster? And a lot of folks that make those claims, and a lot of folks that say that it's a problem, they're the ones that are making the most noise, even though it's like maybe 1 or 2, 3, 4 people instead of like the 75 to 80 to 90% of people that actually approve of this. So I think that's really frustrating, especially on this where the board is capitulating even before anything has actually happened. City safety list is based on an incoherent methodology. A recent Wallet Hub ranking of the safest cities in America only provides readers with a general list of sources, and its weighting system is questionable. For instance, it weighs hurricane risk the same as hail risk. Following trends to determine whether a city is getting safer is more useful than trying to compare cities to each other. This was by Jeff Asher and Jeff-alytics. I wrote a piece in my intro about this, and I'll read it to you now. But I think these city metric lists are silly overall. We tried to do them back in the day when I was at Reconnecting America, and I thought it was a good idea at the time, or maybe I had a better opinion of city ranking lists. But after trying to put this together and talking with some of my colleagues about it after the fact, I think we figured out like city rankings are hard and like they're really ridiculous, and doing apples to apples comparison is really insanely hard. And I like the way that they're thinking about this. Jeff Asher is thinking about this, and that you should compare a city to itself and to its past, where you have apples to apples versus comparing cities to each other is really, really a hard comparison to make. But here's what I wrote. City rankings are a bunch of nonsense. The most livable city is always dependent on personal preferences and the interpretation of metrics that can be hard to compare apples to apples between cities. Top cities to buy a home and lists like it pop out at us from websites and on social media every day. Long ago, during the early days of the Surface Transportation Policy Project, I heard from comms folks that lists were a good way to get media attention to a certain policy or problem within the transportation world. Newspapers loved a good list because they could get people to push back on elected officials when they were ranked really low, or give them kudos when they were ranked really high. We know that this is still the case, as INRIX and Texas Transportation Institute create lists on congestion and commutes that often doesn't include transit outcomes that show up when it seems like every 6 months in papers all across the country. Don't get me wrong, I love a good top 10 list and enjoy the debate, but that's all they are meant to do, is generate debate. The best city for restaurants isn't going to be the same for everyone, nor is the city with the best bike infrastructure if it doesn't exist where you live. So I'm not asking for folks to give up on their best of lists because they can be fun, but maybe turn a more critical eye to them when you see one. Look at the underlying data and then think about what the creator of the list was trying to say or accomplish. Or if you want to get some attention to further the movement for active transportation, make your own list. Okay, next up. How much should a trash can cost? One school of thought on trash cans: put them everywhere to make sure people deposit trash. A second promotes fewer trash cans and expects people to pack trash with them. Most American cities lack the social expectation to pack trash, but well-designed trash cans suitable for city use can cost more than $1,000 each. Premium cans also don't always achieve objectives. This was by Mark Dent in The Hustle. They made two comparisons. One is San Francisco, which we got rid of a lot of cans a long time ago. Gavin Newsom seemed to think that getting rid of cans was a good idea after maybe he went on a trip to Japan, where they have no cans. But in Japan, where they have no cans, they have a culture of people taking all their stuff and not littering. I think there's social pressure there that we just don't have, apparently. But also, what I think is really fascinating is that there's also people making fun of that system, right? Like, why wouldn't you have a trash can in the street when you have to carry a coffee cup everywhere you go until you get home? It's and maybe it's a problem with disposable society as in general, but then there's also I've seen lots of like social media posts, Instagram, etc., where somebody's like ends up at the night sleeping with their coffee cup because they had to carry it around the city with them. It came in their best friend, which shows you kind of how ridiculous it is. But I think that's funny. But also, I do think we should have more trash cans. Like, I guess the other example they gave in the article is at Disneyland, where they have trash cans everywhere so nobody will litter. But there's also, when you get into the park, there's also a different social expectation there. So, I really do I get frustrated at places where there's trash everywhere. I know that here in my neighborhood in San Francisco, there is less trash, but we also have people walking around all the time from the Noe Valley Association picking stuff up, and there are power washers on the street, stuff like that, which is something that I noticed the other day, that like places like Valencia Street don't seem to have as much. They don't seem to have as much. So you see more gum on the streets and more trash and more things. The sidewalks are also narrower, so maybe that's part of the problem, is too many people and they feel a little cramped, and so they start acting a little different. But I find that interesting. And the discussion about trash cans is interesting, and people have their own theories. But I do personally think that we should have trash cans everywhere. Make everything much nicer. Mixed income public housing shows long-term benefits. New research finds that children who spent time in Hope 6 public housing within mixed income neighborhoods saw higher earnings in adulthood. They were also more likely to go to college, and boys were less likely to face incarceration. This was by Christy DeSmith in the Harvard Gazette. Yeah, so there's a data point that's like, for every year that somebody spent in one of these Hope 6 housing complexes, and basically Hope 6 was a program that was actually helped design by the New Urbanists. Henry Cisneros was the HUD director at the time, but the New Urbanists basically put together this program where they were replacing old public housing that has been dilapidated, is falling down. You can think of things like Cabrini Green and some of the big ones that have been replaced. And they built mixed income housing, and they built new urban development designs. And what they found was it didn't really affect the people that were already that had moved in there. They didn't affect their earnings or their long-term outlooks, but it did affect their children's outlooks. And what that means is that if they had the children if they lived in a mixed income neighborhood, they were able to get involved in local schools in the neighborhood as a whole, and they actually had better outcomes. I think it was like 50% better earnings over the lifetime on average, and also more of them, like I said previously, they went to school, they were less incarcerated. But for every year that one of these kids lived in a Hope 6 project, they had a 3% earnings increase in their ability to make more earnings over their lifetime, which is an incredible result. And it's an incredible result for new urbanism. I saw a lot of people saying that basically, maybe this was actually one of the best outcomes of new urbanism over the last 30, 40 years. Not just the code changes where people are talking about form-based codes, or the design standards or the charter or the things that came out of all those things, performance-based zoning, et cetera. But this might be the best thing because of the research that's come out. I think that's a really interesting idea. And the benefits can be seen over the long term. Now we have from the 90s, we have such a huge, body of evidence now that you can actually make those arguments. And I find that really fascinating. It's one thing that's frustrating about being a planner is that, you make plans or you do things early on that don't really quite come to fruition until 20, 30, 40 years later. And now the folks that were doing stuff like that in the 90s, they're seeing some of the, benefits come to fruition, and the things that they believed in, especially those new urbanists, apparently they see benefits over time. And so I think that's really, really rewarding. Where's my package? Amazon's logistics networks create a web over cities that allow a company to deliver a package at lightning speeds, beating competition around the country. But that domination also impacts streets, workers, and stifles competition. Benjamin Fong used Amazon labels on packages to track the movement of packages to New York through the company's notoriously secretive warehouse and logistics system. Understanding this system could be the key to finding pinch points and organizing the labor force. This was Benjamin Fong in Urban Omnibus. The interesting thing about this article is just how detailed Benjamin got. The items that, the mapping that he did, the logistics kind of outlook that he put together is really fascinating. It shows kind of where those pinch points are in the network and in the system, and also gives advocates like basically a way to look at how to address the system, or at least attack the system if they want to. So this one's one I can't really explain as well because it's so detailed and it's so good that I wish that folks can go read it, because I think it's really, really cool. So I hope folks go check it out. Obviously, as always, I have these in the show notes. I put all the links to all these articles. So if you want to go in and check it out, you can also find, basically the show note links when we put this up on the website. So go to theoverheadwire.com when you hear this, and there will be the first blog item will be the post for this, for this podcast. And then you can see all the show notes that we connected. So go out, and if you do click on one article to read, I find that the most interesting, this one is the Urban Omnibus article by Benjamin Fong. And finally, in the main items, Energy Star lives. The appliance energy efficiency program known as Energy Star will receive $33 million from recently passed legislation. The Environmental Protection Agency under Lee Zeldin tried to kill the program after requests from right-leaning think tanks to zero out the program showed up in Trump's budget requests. But the unpopularity of killing the program likely saved it. 90% of consumers recognize the logo, and it has saved consumers $500 billion in energy costs since 1992. This was by Jeff Brady in NPR. Basically, the Energy Star program is the EPA hires outside experts to test appliances, dishwashers, refrigerators, ovens, things like that, to see how much energy they use. And if they are low energy use, they give them the Energy Star rating. And so this actually is something that is used by folks who build apartment buildings and others to see how they can actually save money by over the long term if they're renting the apartments, for example. So, for example, if you are buying or building an apartment building and you want to buy a stove for every unit, you want to have an Energy Star score that's really low, because what happens is if you're the one that's paying the energy bills for those places, then you want to reduce your, the amount you spend. And so the idea that the Trump administration was like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. We just want people to be able to use gas, or we want to be able to let people to have choice in whatever appliance people want, which is silly, because energy efficiency is such a big deal in terms of what people can save over the long term. And so I feel like this is really a frustrating part of the discussion right now with renewable energy and things like that. Is like, over the long term, it will save us money. I mean, you think about solar panels and how much they save people who live in hot climates for their air conditioning bills. Like, if you just put solar on you're going to pay back that really fast, instead of paying the energy company to provide you with energy from the plant that's burning fossil fuels. You get it directly from the sun. So on a hot day, if it's hot, it's going to be sunny, and if it's sunny, you're going to get extra air conditioning, and it works out really well, and it saves people money, and it's incredible. Same thing with appliances. Why wouldn't we want to do something that saves everybody money, that gives people more affordable options, especially when everybody's using things like ovens and dishwashers and refrigerators, things that help us kind of make our lives easier. And so spending more money is not the answer, and getting rid of the Energy Star program obviously wasn't the answer for everybody either. Okay, bonus items. LAMetro staff have recommended a subway alignment for the Supulveda corridor, which links the LA basin with UCLA and UCLA to the San Fernando Valley. This was in the Daily Bruin. Yeah, do a subway. No monorails, none of that. Just make a subway. Save people 30 minutes on their time. It's going to be a game changer. Build it now. Build it yesterday. Build it 30 years ago. They should have done it a long time ago, but here we are. And so this is the best way to go. And all the people that live on the mountain that are annoyed that they're going to be tunneling under them, too bad. Sorry. Just build this. It's going to make people's lives easier. The Trump EPA will stop considering monetary value for the public health impacts of regulations, including lives saved and other calculations, and only calculate the costs to industry. The change will make it easier for coal-fired power plants, steel mills, and oil refineries to increase particulate emissions. This was in the New York Times. Yeah, this is like what I said earlier. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we polluting more when we have all the renewable energy ideas that we have now, and we could do way more? This sop to industry is just really frustrating, and I don't like that the administration keeps pushing this on us. And then they're trying to get rid of the endangerment finding, which means that they're going to not be able to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, like, there's a point at when you just look like a supervillain. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. New research shows that medical debt is associated with a 44% increase in housing instability the following year. The growing unaffordability of housing and healthcare is creating more situations where people struggle. This was in Consumer Affairs. Yeah, we know that housing and transportation costs are connected, and affordability are connected to people's housing instability and their medical debt, right? How much people go into debt. Most of the people that are homeless in California, for example, there's a PPIC report that basically said, like 85% of the people in California, it's not drugs, and it's not, the other things that people usually are associating with housing. It's one bad luck thing where you were in stable housing and you had a job and something happened and you had this big bill. It might have been like a health scare. It might have been something along those lines. And then you just, you spiraled and lost control because you didn't have the money to cover it. And so the bankruptcy came, and then the house left, and then you have no home. And that's, how you end up there. The bad luck is the main generator of homelessness in California, not all this other stuff that people usually claim it. Some of it is, but a lot of it isn't. There's a lot of functionally homeless people, that are out there, vehicular homelessness. There are even people that we've had on this show that have shared with us that they were homeless for a little bit, whether they were in college or something. They were sleeping out of their car to go to university or whatever that might be. There's a lot of stories like that where people just have a run of bad luck, or they run out of money, or something along those lines happens. And so this is not an unsurprising finding that medical debt is associated with housing instability. Right at the end of his tenure, Governor New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy signed an e-bike bill that would require every rider, no matter the type of e-bike, to be registered and insured. It is the most strict set of rules in the country. This is in GovTech. I don't like that. I just don't like all the rules and regulations they're trying to throw on e-bikes. Maybe if they're e-motos over a certain speed limit, they just need like 2 levels of electric bicycles. One is the ones that go really fast, and one is the ones that are just like regular bicycles that just have a little bit of assist. Or like maybe you can go like 10, 15 miles an hour, 18 miles an hour, whatever it is. But if you're going 30, like that's silly. You should have like the registration and regulations and all the stuff that comes with going faster. But if you're going slower, and it's just like one of those things that they're basically targeting delivery workers and the like. I just don't like that. Frustrations about water and energy use for new data centers are increasing, but a new report from RMI found that before the single data center is turned on, emissions are created from concrete used in the construction of these massive buildings. This was in Bloomberg. Yeah, so you're going to pour a bunch of concrete, you're going to create a bunch of emissions. I think that's for most buildings. I know there's a lot of folks out there that believe that, reusing a building is way better than tearing it down and building a bigger one, but sometimes it makes sense to build a new one and have it last for a long time. In this case, the data center thing, I just don't see why we're building so many. It doesn't make any sense. We could be more energy efficient. We could figure out a way to be better about that, but I think feels like they're just building GPUs indiscriminately and just throwing them out there and saying like, hey, we have a ton of computing powder, but they need to figure out how to do it better. The city of Richmond, Virginia, set up a new Department of Transportation separate from the Department of Public Works after a spate of traffic-related deaths. DOT will be in charge of planning, designing, and delivering transportation in the city. This is the Commonwealth Times. Andy Bonneau, I think that's how you say Andy's last name, is now the director of that department. He's writes at Fast Company and a number of other places on the internet. And finally, a pilot program in Oregon that concluded last year found that homeless youth that participated in Universal Basic Income program that gave them $1,000 a month found housing at a rate of 94%. This was in the Portland Oregonian. So yeah, going back to that kind of the thing that we discussed before about housing and financial insecurity. If people are given money to pay for housing, then they are a little bit more secure in their housing. And so this is an interesting pilot program that gave universal basic income to homeless youth, and they were able to find housing. Amazing that. And we need to build more housing too, so it's cheaper so people can afford it. Because if they have a financial crisis, they're not, otherwise they might not be able to afford it, those types of things. I feel like I'm just preaching to the choir here, but it's frustrating nonetheless. A developer in Cambridge, Massachusetts is suing the city and the state's land court on the idea that inclusionary zoning should be considered a taking under the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. If he wins, 141 jurisdictions in the state with inclusionary zoning regulations could be impacted by the ruling, and much, much more. This is in WBUR. Basically, what this is saying is that the regulations from the city in Cambridge the developer believes, are taking away profits, or he has to go underwater to build these units because of all the regulations and rules that go along with building inclusionary. And so he got the inclusionary ordinance, and he has to build the extra units if he wants to build the building itself. And so he's saying that this is a taking under the Fifth Amendment. Takings regulations are big ones. There's been a whole thing about this in the past. One of the ones is Kello versus New London, where they basically were able to take a whole area and they still haven't redeveloped it yet. So there's a lot of frustration that comes from that. Now, I don't know if the court got that one right or not. Representative Latifah Simon of California wants to bring transit ambassador programs like the one we talked about last week that was created at BART to transit agencies around the country. They want to bring it to transit agencies around the country. The hope is that non-armed representatives at agencies will be empowered to reduce conflicts that will otherwise have led to law enforcement intervention. This is in Berkeleyside. I think that's a good idea, and it's kind of like what we talked about last week. I feel like the ambassador programs, the police reform programs that mean that more public health professionals and mental health professionals are coming to respond to some of these situations that police officers actually makes a lot of sense. And finally, a new USDOT Beautification Council met on February 2nd to discuss how to bring more beauty in design of transportation infrastructure around the country. The council is advisory with no funding or authority, but is likely to follow recent executive orders on the subject. This is in Fast Company. I don't like the idea of like a central design organization that says basically we should do only classical architecture. We should design these in a way that's beautiful. And I kind of get where they're going because, if you think about back in the 20s and during the Art Deco movement, there's a lot of like classic stuff that looks great, that was designed well. And I feel like part of that wasn't just the design, it was actually the craftsmanship that folks had, the amount of money extra that was spent on things such as ornamentation. And so some of this isn't just like beauty, and the modernism movement that was kind of like, clean lines and pushing away some of this old ornamentation. And now there's a lot of buildings in that style. But also we just don't spend as much money on projects. Like, you're not going to build a library now where, in some places do, I guess, but you're not going to build a library now where it's going to be these Ionic columns and classical Greek architecture, or they're not going to have the money to do all the gargoyles and stuff on some of the buildings like they did back in the day. All the buildings, like saw the new Ghostbusters movie, and so thinking about some of the buildings in the original Ghostbusters movie where they had all the animals on the sides of the buildings and the spouts that were eagles and things like that, whatever it may be. But just how, nobody does that now because they're trying to save money. You're trying to build to save money and make money, basically. So I think that's part of the problem, is like we just don't spend money on public works as much because it's so expensive, and we overspend on things because of the way that the regulations push us that way. And also some of the other things that are going on. We talk about this in the transit costs project problem and things like that. But I don't need some council on beauty to tell us how to build a high-speed rail line. I want them to figure out how to build it cheaper first, and then you can add beauty on it. And maybe the beauty comes from doing it cheaper. Maybe it's beautiful because of the way it was built, because it was done in a way that was mindful of how much it was going to cost. And so maybe it turns out prettier because you figure something out like that. I don't know, but that's the way I'm thinking about it. I don't know. What do you all think about this? I'm interested in your thoughts on a beautification council for USDOT. I also don't like it because it feels kind of fash. feels kind of like too much prescription feels like telling people what to do is never kind of the way. Collaboration is way better than the top down kind of idea, but that's just me. Okay. This week and every week, I want to thank your generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome to keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without it, so thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. We've had people sign up a lot lately. I appreciate that. $2 a month will get you some stickers and a handwritten note, and the stamp. I still have the train station stamp, so people are still getting those. $10 a month will get you one of our bus-only or bike-only scarves. Also, if you want to do the $1 a month, you'll get this podcast and Talking Headways ad-free. Also, I want to mention we did produce an audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's 1909 classic, Town Planning and Practice. If you want to get your hands on one, go to raymondunwin.com. And finally, listener questions and comments. If you have a comment or question, feel free to tweet at us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears, or feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Feel free to email us even if you don't want your note read out. I'm more than happy to gather notes from folks and respond personally. Have any questions, shoot them over again to theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Puppies and Butterflies is part of the show. We talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe it just didn't fit in the other sections. Mandalorian Grogu commercial at the Superbowl. Really interesting that they're riding tauntauns. I like that from Empire Strikes Back. I'm just looking forward to this movie. I hope it comes out, and I hope they advertise it more lately because I know that a lot of people don't know it's coming. And the halftime show was really cool. It was interesting. All that grass was people. That was really fascinating too. I think there was an article in the New York Times about the design of halftime shows, which is really cool. I'll put that in the show notes as well. I think it's in this week's, it's tomorrow's newsletter on Tuesday. And then finally, the Olympics are on. I'm in the Olympics. In it. I'm not in it. I'm not there. But I'm into it. I love cross-country skiing. I love curling. I love biathlon, luge, downhill skiing, all that stuff is super fun. I'm not as much into the ice skating and things like that, but I'll watch it. It's kind of fun to see some of that stuff. Not as big into the ice hockey either, but I do love all of the other things that go along with that. And, as I've said before, I love the Olympics just because it's kind of like this humility, this history, a competition to a nonviolent end. I tell this story a million times and I'll tell it a million more, but I went to London in 2012 and it was one of the best experiences I ever had. I was there for 2.5 weeks. I stayed with friends and we just had such a blast. I had friends that were competing that got medals. We went to a number of I went to fencing, I went to table tennis, I went to judo, I went to track and field, I went to the women's soccer final. It was so fun, and it was so fun to just have everybody there and be joyful, celebrating diversity and differences, excited when somebody else won, even if it wasn't your own team. I remember cheering so hard for the Venezuelan to win the fencing, and it was Ruben Lamardo, that was his name. And it was so much fun. And the people with the Venezuelan flag were so happy. And then we saw him on the train on the way back on the tube. It's just real. It's human and it's amazing. And I wish that more of our world could be like that because it's just nice. It's nice. Okay. You can find me at Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes Threads, Substack, YouTube, and of course on my website, theoverheadwire.com, and in your inbox every morning if you sign up for the newsletter, and on Flickr, we're Transit Nerds. Everything else is at The Overhead Wire. Thanks for joining us on the Mondays at The Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous patrons for sponsoring this week's podcast. We'll see you next time.
Talk